Thank you so much for joining us for this session on product-led growth and expansion enablement. I am really excited to be joined by what I have to be most grateful for, two friends that I've known well, for a couple years. Jenn, although I still haven't met you in person, I know we talk about that a while, and it's actually a thing. Like, I need to go and meet you in person. Tim, I've known you for, 13 years or so. We were both in the ad tech business. And I think the first time I met you, if I remember correctly, was probably Mobile World in like 2000, I'm going to say 2011 or so, something like that.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. You were, I think in BD, and it was, it was fun. I think we maybe we're working on some partnerships. But anyways, for all the folks out there, thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions, go ahead and click on the chat function. You should see it on the right-hand side if you have any questions that pop up. But today, again, we're going to be talking about product-led growth. Jenn, why don't you kick us off real quick? Just kind of give a quick background. Congratulations on the recent acquisition as well. And I know you have a new venture going on.
Yeah. So I'm Jenn Steele. The recent acquisition George is talking about that I feel like I should address is that I was the CEO of Kissmetrics that I took over to turn around and sell, and successfully did so in May. My next venture we're calling SoundGTM, and it is a referral partnerships platform, so a double-sided marketplace coming soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So definitely check out Jenn. Maybe Jenn and Tim, towards the end or at some point, maybe drop in your LinkedIn URL in the chat so folks can follow you and keep up to date. Tim, how about yourself? I know I gave a quick intro on our friendship, but maybe a little bit about what you're up to now.
Sure. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Correlated. We help sales teams figure out which customers have the highest propensity to convert, expand, be cross-sold into. We do that by using a mix of first-party data coming from like your product or your website, and then also third-party data just about companies and about people. Happy to share more about kind of insights related to what I've seen running Correlated, and then also prior to that.
There's been a lot of discussion about PLG, I would say the last 3 years or so, and shout out to OpenView for creating the category, now torching us moving forward. But no, all jokes aside, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to have more consumer-like experiences, right? To really adapt to the way that we as stakeholders at B2B businesses want to buy and also sell, right? But I think largely it's been about buyer enablement. It's sort of been that trend. Tim, from your perspective, and I know your technology does this, but you've been in this for quite a while now. What is PLG? I know there's PLR, product-led revenue, product-led sales, these sort of things. From your perspective, what is it? And at a high level, kind of like how do organizations take advantage of this approach?
Yeah, I think the simplest sort of definition is, PLG stands for product-led growth. It really just means, your product should be part of your growth strategy, as a company. And so that's a really broad definition, and the actual practice of PLG is really varied and variable. You can do lots of different things, whether it's have a fully self-serve product that someone could just go to your website and sign up for and start using. It could be something like a free trial. It could be something like a demo experience where people can get a feel for your product. It could be something where you don't even have any kind of self-serve product, but once someone's purchased your product, they can maybe in a more self-serve way upgrade and be cross-sold. So there's all sorts of different flavors kind of PLG in my mind, and that makes it a little hard to define or pin down, but it also, I think, is just the reality of the situation. I think the maybe thing that I'd like people to take away, though, is that ultimately it's about providing like a better experience for buyers, for users of software. The more you can make it sort of easy for people to kind of engage with, use, and then purchase your products, I think the better off everyone will be, both the buyers and end users, and then also the companies that are trying to sell software. It's just a lot easier for everybody. So that's my maybe longer-winded definition. Happy to dive in wherever.
Jenn, what's your take? And I know, we work together at a company that really helped enable a version of that product-led
Mhm.
motion.
Yes, and we work together on the marketing team, and so we've talked a lot about how to talk about this, et cetera. And so the quick definition I use is product-led growth is when you use your product to sell your product. I was actually just in a conversion rate optimization seminar this morning where they talked about if you're selling software, people want to see it. And I would argue they don't just want to see it, they want to touch it, they want to play with it, they want to use it. And I think I love the product-led growth has made that more possible across more companies.
Are there any sort of reasons why you think right now, Tim, like PLG is so hot, like right now, in this market?
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting. I feel like every, week there's another battle on LinkedIn or whatever about, it's product-led growth versus sales-led, and, people come out on either side. And in my mind, it's kind of both. And it always should be a mix of both in terms of how you go to market. There's no one size fits all for anybody. There's no like one way to do things. I think product-led growth has kind of enduring interest because, like I said before, it's a little bit of a hard target to pin down in terms of what the definition actually is. I think that whenever a company or organization starts to maybe hit scaling challenges or have retention issues or whatever it might be, you try and maybe look towards other approaches or strategies that can then help solve those problems. And often, most companies aren't pure PLG in the sense they're not purely self-serve products, and so you might look towards that becoming more product led as a way to kind of solve some of the challenges you're facing as a business. So I think that's my answer as to why it kind of continues to endure as a sort of popular thing that people talk about. And just anecdotally, we see a ton of companies that you wouldn't think of as being product led add in some form of self-serve experience, whether it's through like a demo experience on their website or in their product onboarding or a free trial or something like that. So we're just seeing a lot of it from companies that you might not expect.
And Jenn, people are talking about how it's the future and these sort of things, and any sort of thoughts of like, do you believe that that's the case? And what might it actually look like? And also, why do you think it's so hot right now?
I'm going to start with the last question first. I think it's really hot right now because we're all chasing efficiency. I think there's a fallacy that it takes less work to do than sales-led growth, which is definitely a fallacy. But there is the truth that once you start using product-led growth and you actually put the work into it, it does scale better, right? Just like a product scales better than a services company. And so I don't know that we're going to go backwards here because we talked about it already, the consumerization of B2B. And as such, we're going to continue to go forwards, but I'm hoping that we can kill off the it doesn't actually take any work to do myth.
Yeah, I think that is a huge fallacy. And you think that, all those companies like Asana and Loom and stuff like that that they started off just putting a product out there and that that people came. And the reality is that it was very much a hybrid approach. And to your point, once you can start to get those hooks in from a product led channel perspective, then great. But I still think that organizations need that now sort of, I mean, you might even look at it as a three-pronged approach where you're still doing your outbound, like good outbound, not the crap that we see every day, continuing to do inbound. You're not going to now not do content and whatnot, right? We still have this infrastructure that should drive inbound, but then how does PLG work into those strategies too, right? Because there's ways to do that. So that makes a lot of sense. Actually, that's a good segue, Jenn, into like how sales-led organizations can take advantage of product-led, let's just call it channels, right?
So I find it interesting because we all know Monday.com is one of the, PLG success stories. Are folks aware that in their publicly publicly filed things, they say they spent 60% of their budget on sales and marketing. Like, they're not leaving behind sales in any way, shape, or form, no matter. And we talk about, I hate their interface personally, but I know that they've done a really great job of optimizing the product-led journey. And so we can actually easily extrapolate that to some extent, right? If Monday.com, the hero of PLG or one of the heroes of PLG, still needs to invest in a sales team, then we need to consider why. And fundamentally, especially for bigger deals, humans make other humans feel better. Like, is it great to use the product, to know it works, to trust the product? Absolutely. But humans still buy from humans, especially in larger deals. And the nice thing about the product-led channel funnel, whatever you want to call this, though, is that instead of having a lot of annoying sales tactics that George alluded to before, we can use the product and product-led growth motions to effectively create warmer leads and a better sales experience for a more traditional sales team.
Awesome. Are there any sort of, I don't know, Tim, things that you're seeing that sales-led organizations are doing to take advantage of that? Essentially, we're talking about like product insights, right? Like, usage data, the PQL has been a big thing, right? That we talked a lot about.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a mix of data being leveraged together to try and infer intent, and so that's what a lot of our customers are starting to do. And basically, the PQL is part of that, and sort of how we define PQL or PQA, which stands for Product Qualified Account, is basically what mix of different data, including behavioral data in the product, but also data on the website, and then also firmographic or technographic data around the company or the person. What kind of mix of that can you look at to then kind of infer propensity to buy? And then can you pair that kind of propensity score with a sort of trigger? And so a lot of times the trigger conditions that we look at are things that are more inbound, like did they go to the pricing page? Are they kind of more active than average within the product? Have they invited teammates in? So sort of common triggers like that. And then we see some of our customers leveraging external triggers. We have a few customers that are using buyer intent data on top of kind of product data. So think of more of like traditional ABM type approaches to say, okay, these accounts are in market for this product. They've also had people in trials of our products, so they're like kicking the tires, maybe on a POC, self-guided POC, and then they're hitting a higher propensity score from a PQL or PQA standpoint, and then they're also kind of in this buyer intent bucket. So those are kind of some of the tactics that we're seeing our customers leverage to try and find these types of in-market customers. I think especially in the current environment, any intent-based signals, whether it's from the product or from third-party sources, sales teams are just addicted to that because it's so hard to sell right now that they love any kind of intent that they can infer.
Tim, not to go on a tangent here, but from what you're observing, because I know you're knee deep in this stuff right now, is it that it's so hard to sell because prospects are just not coming at the top of the funnel, or is it more like mid-funnel decision making is stalled and people are haggling prices or asking for discounts more, and sales cycles are just now much longer?
I think for a specific set of the market, which I would define as kind of mid-market technology companies, there has been a lot of pain and suffering over the last 18 months or so, 24 months. And so I think if you are selling into those kind of companies as customers, it is really a lot more challenging than it was in 2021 to kind of get people moving fast to kind of buy stuff quickly and buy stuff without a lot of checks and balances. And so I think that doesn't mean that people aren't buying software. I think a lot of companies are, even in that category. And there are other categories outside of software, of course, like travel and energy and financial services, all these categories that might be kind of almost immune to some of the things that tech has seen. But I think in general, when it's those mid-market kind of that kind of segment, it's just a little bit more challenging to sell to. And therefore, as a result, because it's been more challenging just from like a more macro standpoint, sales teams are excited when they're able to identify the pockets of intent where those companies are looking for something, whether it's a replacement for something they already have or something net new to fill a gap they don't have filled right now.
Jenn, question about freemium and free trials. Like, I talk to revenue leaders all the time, and for some reason they ask me about PLG, and I'll go into like, freemium, free trial options, things like that. But one of the big sort of like pushbacks there that I hear often is, how do we make sure that model, that freemium, that free trial, does not cannibalize my sales motions?
Here's the thing, though. Don't you want it to cannibalize some of your sales motions? Don't you? I mean, you don't want it to cannibalize revenue, but wouldn't you like it to kind of cannibalize some of what your BDRs are doing so that you can use them on better tasks? Like it's yeah. Apparently, Tim.
I'm not going to interrupt you, but I have a thought
feel
there.
free to.
There's a heavy +1 on that one.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you want to structure freemium and free trials such that you're not giving away everything and thereby cannibalizing revenue. And that's where people find reverse trials, where you give them everything up front and then close it down. And then they're like, but I wanted this. And it's like, well, you have to pay me for that. And then sales gets involved, et cetera, right? There are ways to make it so that you don't cannibalize your revenue that are actually fairly straightforward. But I want my product to cannibalize the really tough parts of my sales process.
Well, it's interesting because I think that, one of the things I've heard is, our salespeople call a prospect and they say, oh yeah, I'm already using your free version. Why would I upgrade? Well, for me, it's a business model problem, right? Like that's a pricing tier problem. That's not a PLG problem. That's like your strategy is poorly put together, right? If that's happening, then you got to put new guardrails on there.
Product-led growth is not your problem if that's happening,
right? But this is an issue. I literally spoke to actually a founder recently in the interactive like demo space, and he was telling me that they don't do the freemium anymore because people just wanted to stay on their freemium and not upgrade or pay enterprise or direct the other direct sales pricing options, and that's what I thought to myself, well, what was going on there? Like it's not really a freemium, right? But they ended up killing it, right? And I just think they weren't leveraging it properly. If you were to think about like some ways that organizations that maybe don't have or don't fall into the category of like having those self-serve products and things like that, and those credit card transactions, how do you think that like sales-led organizations, Tim, can start to roll out maybe like a version 1 of a PLG motion, maybe start to get some of those that product insight?
Yeah, so we're working with a lot of those types of companies right now. The most common thing that we see, sorry, I have a business phone and it just rings nonstop. Google phone, it's great.
I need one of those, by the way.
Yeah, it's my burner, which is
nice.
Fantastic. Yeah, so what we're seeing a lot of examples of those, and I think the most common thing that we're seeing is a free trial. That's representative of some sort of stripped down version of the kind of existing enterprise product. And I'm not sure this is necessarily the best way, but it's fairly common. And basically you're able to give some sense of kind of how the more enterprise product works. You're able to make it more seamless for an end user maybe to sign up, or even an org to sign up, and then obviously it's a gated trial. There's a time bound there. So that you're kind of giving the sales team a way to kind of go into those trials and be like, hey, can we help, yada, yada. So that's what we see the most commonly. The second most commonly ironically enough, is like an acquisition. So we've seen a number of companies that are larger companies acquire like a PLG product and then have that as kind of like a top of funnel. Obviously, not everyone can do this, but we do see it. Kind of have a top of funnel driver, but it's on a separate product line. There's nothing preventing you, I think, from doing that organically. I've just seen it more, happen more often, where it's kind of like a smaller acquisition that's added in. So those are some of the things that we've seen. I just want to go back really quickly to the comment about sales teams and what they should be focused on, because I loved it so much from you, Jenn. So we talked to a company that I won't name, and they're having their sales team right now. They're pure PLG, so that means they're self-serve to the core. And a lot of their sales team is spending time focusing on $1,000 ACV deals, and it's like it basically breaks kind of every model as far as sales and marketing expense and payback when you're having your sales team waste time. And so they have a full self-serve version, but they're operationally and organizationally not kind of enabling their sales team to spend their time in better ways. And as a result, a lot of the sales teams wasting time working those $1,000 deals. So I would say that's kind of the you want the product to cannibalize from sales in that case, because there's no way that works economically to have a well compensated salesperson close $1,000 deal. So anyway, that's my thought on that, and hopefully I answered the question on kind of the sales led approach as well.
Jenn, anything you want to add to that?
Sorry, seasonal allergies over here.
I got it myself. You should see my eyes up close.
I know. One of mine started itching, and I was like, behave. Back to the question about companies that don't feel like they can do product-led growth, it can be super challenging. So when I was CEO of Kissmetrics, it's an analytics platform, which means that we need your data. You need to install a JavaScript. And while I have my own trials and tribulations about our free trial motion and how many people now have dead dummy JavaScript on their site, but that's neither here nor there. Fundamentally, get creative. Just because you can't actually have a free trial with their data doesn't mean you can't have a sandbox with dummy data so that they can play with the product. Think of ways, and there are tons of tools out there that actually make this way more possible. Once upon a time, your developers just had to build this from scratch if you wanted to do it. And it can take an entire team of developers to maintain a demo environment or a sandbox environment. But in this case, just get creative about it and investigate your options. Just because you have a complex product or an analytics product or something like that doesn't mean you can't use product-led growth. And I would argue most complex or analytical products, people want to touch and feel even more than something that's relatively straightforward.
Yeah, and of course, there's these, as we've alluded to a couple of times, platforms out there. There's the Reprises of the world, there's the Nevadics, the Walnuts, the Demo Stacks. I mean, that whole space is just really exploded big time. That allows you to either deploy a product tour or have these live demos that are facilitated through your salesperson, or a combination of both. But also, I've been hearing from a couple organizations out there that they've been sort of mixing these experiences with their free trials and their freemium products, right? So as opposed to having like an empty box where you just sign up and you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Oh, there's a wizard here, but it's like I don't have any data in there, etc. You can have kind of like some experiences within that free trial that show you what it's supposed to look like at full value, right? So just some really interesting things for the folks out there thinking about this that you can start to play around with or test. Tim, if you think about how, let's say, ICs, these SDRs and AEs, etc., should approach PLG sources versus the traditional, inbound and outbound leads, are there any distinctions that really kind of like stand out a little bit more? I know that, it kind of depends, and there's some very quantitative things, right, that you can point to based on, product engagement, etc. But are there any psychological things? That's what comes to mind to me, right? Are there any like different approaches to the story or to the role that you play? Obviously, if someone has been in your product and kicked the tires on it for, I don't know, X days or whatever, they might have a different set of expectations or even needs. And so me going in with a story or a approach that that I might have with someone who hasn't seen the product might be different.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say kind of the biggest thing to keep in mind on the sales side or SDR side for kind of PLG, and this is true for free trials as well, is oftentimes the kind of people in the product aren't necessarily the buyers, right? So you might have a product, let's use an example like Loom or whatever, and you could have a ton of salespeople or support people or customer success people, product engineering in Loom, but they're individual contributors. They're the ones kind of using the product to do their jobs. So if you're a salesperson, there can be maybe productive things you do, like, hey, seems like everyone's using Loom at XYZ company. Can you tell me more about how you guys are using it? So you can use it for like research if you want to try and develop a story for an enterprise sale. But if you're hoping to email one of them and be like, hey, you want to buy this? Or like, that's not, I don't do that. That's not my role. So I think that is something that a good seller or SDR kind of approaching product users needs to be cognizant of is, okay, not only do I need to know, like, okay, there's a lot of people in the product, for Loom, for example, but I need to figure out who's the buyer typically. How do I leverage that usage and the people using it and maybe find a champion or whatever it might be to get in front of the buyer? Maybe that buyer's in the product, maybe they're not. And so, figuring that out, I think, is a real challenge and one of the big fun parts of product-led sales.
One thing that comes to mind as you sort of articulate all this stuff, Tim, is this notion of the champion, right? The champion before in pre-product led experiences might just be someone who's resonating with the story, maybe has a pain that you're providing a solution for, but is not necessarily generating product activity. And so like PLG for the folks out there can really provide you with an additional set of data points, and in some ways really hook the user, right, and make a better case, because it's now not just theory, but it's like, no, they've test driven the product, right, and so there's in some cases could be a lot more validity to their championing of this solution. So just something to think about. Jenn, I know we have talked a lot about full funnel PLG, right? Over the years. For folks out there who, a lot of the time are maybe thinking it's just top of the funnel, any sort of tips or wisdom that you can provide around what PLG might look like full funnel?
Yes, although we came up with the full funnel PLG when we had to sell to both sales and marketing, and it was like, how do we do this? Oh, let's talk about the whole funnel. So just a little peek behind the curtain for any of you who've wondered where that phrase comes from before. But I think the best example of it actually has more to do with NRR. Because we need to retain, we need to keep people in, and we need to upsell, we need to do all of that, all of those things post initial sale. And so your product is the most important at that point, and being able to continue to identify aha moments and ways for people to really value your product. It's all the product at that point, right? And maybe your CS team. But I think where George is trying to get me to go is that you can use your product anywhere in the funnel. So whether it is you're doing a content offering and you happen to illustrate your point with a screenshot from your product. As I said earlier in this call, people want to see, if you're a product company, people want to see the product. Show it to them as early as you possibly can.
Tim, if you think about expansion, I think like my first question is like, how do we leverage these insights for expansion? I know it seems obvious, but sadly, it's not obvious to some folks out there, quite a bit of folks. And then the other piece is like, who's owning this, right? Should this be the AE that's pulling, insights and doing expansion, or do you recommend like an expansion team, or is that CS?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we see with a number of our customers that are using us to identify, expansion opportunities is that they'll typically have a sales team and these are more kind of mid-market enterprise type companies, they'll have a sales team that's focused exclusively on expansion. And so that's like selling into the installed base of existing customers. That definition can be a little squishy, right? Because sometimes that can mean it's a self-serve customer that's paying $99 a month or whatever it might be, and that expanding that customer is the job. So it's effectively like a normal sort of sales role selling new business. It just happens to be a customer paying something already, but it looks a lot like new business sales, even though it is still expansion. So yeah, often it's a dedicated team. We are working with some customers that are doing this out of the CS team. So they're maybe a little bit of a smaller company. They don't have the ability to really specialize, and they have a expansion sales team. And so CS will be kind of owning the expansion of existing customers. But I think the interesting thing for me, and a trend that we're kind of betting on at Correlated, is that expansion as like a sales tactic or pursuit is going to be a lot more important over the course of the next 2-3 years. I think most companies kind of view it as a little bit of an afterthought, or like it's like, hey, we're going to get over 100% NDR because we have a great product that naturally lands and expands, and people just raise their hand and buy more. And I think that worked in 2020, 21, and you see 200% NRR for like Snowflake or whatever it is. I think that in the current environment, that's not as much the case. You're seeing a lot of downsells and contraction, and it's like, okay, we got to figure this out. So we're betting on the fact that it's going to be something people take a lot more seriously from a sales standpoint, not just from a customer success. Like, let's manage the book of business and hope people are happy during their QBRs.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right. I know we're coming up here to the end. In 60 seconds, what tips could you give, or maybe it's one tip that you would give CEOs, all right, or the exec team around having that conversation at the board level, saying, something like introducing, PLG, right? So, how do you introduce that to be able to convince that board that it's worth the, the resources and essentially the bet? And maybe Tim, if you want to lead us here.
I think the 60-second pitch is, if you look at the sort of companies that have gone public, and even if they've gotten beaten up in the last couple of years, you look at the companies that are product-led versus sales-led. The product-led ones are doing really well, and have by and large been kind of outperformers with respect to any metric that you want to look at, valuation and how the market is basically apprising that business and the quality of that business. So I would say that might be the biggest pitch I would make, and in terms of why you should do it. It's ultimately going to lead to you having a better business, which I think anyone running a company is trying to do.
Awesome. Jenn, why don't you take us home here?
Well, I'm not going to really add much to it. I think Tim's pitch stands alone. I actually would like to talk to CEOs of almost a cautionary tale, which is PLG is not set it and forget it. And, as a CEO, you need to pay just as much attention to your PLG motion as your traditional outbound sales motion. And that means talking about it to the board. That means talking about it in your company. And that means, watching the metrics on that, just like you watch the metrics on all the other funnel opportunities you have.
Awesome. Jenn, Tim, thank you so much for being at the event here today, sharing your insights, sharing your experience. If folks want to follow you, I think we put your URLs perfect into the chat there, just to be able to connect with you, get some insights here. Maybe you never know, right? Maybe they're new friends or new colleagues. But thanks again for doing this today. And for everyone else, feel free to click on the schedule here for the last panel. You'll see the schedule on the top left of your screen, the last panel on product marketing and sales enablement done right. Tim, Jenn, have a great day, and thanks again.